This is The Culture.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Cinema Wave podcast. This time we are recording right off the heels of the Loki Season 2 finale. The episode is called Glorious Purpose. I am one of your hosts. My name is Darian Scalamoni. I am joined by my Marvel buddy, Michael Peniston.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome. Happy to be back.
We have so much to talk about, so strap in. I want to give everybody right now a spoiler-heavy warning. Now, we are putting this episode out as soon as possible, but if you haven't watched season 2 of Loki, if you haven't watched the last episode of Loki, episode 6, the season finale, titled Glorious Purpose, please go watch the episode, come back, tune into our conversation. A lot of insight, a lot of analysis, and we're going to dive right in. So you have been warned. Spoilers ahead.
Big warning.
All right. So I want to start with something that is not necessarily completely spoiler heavy, but something that I want to assess your opinion of at the end of the episode and of season 2 as a whole of Loki. Mm-hmm. Tom Hiddleston has been playing this role for a very long time. 2011, I believe, is when the first Thor came out. So we're 12 years into him playing this role. Crazy longevity, right? Different versions of this character throughout the variants, all of it. At the end of this season, where is your heart and your head at with Tom Hiddleston's portrayal of Loki?
My heart and my head at wow. That's a big question.
It is.
It is. I think I can put Tom Hiddleston, in that boat as far as a legend in just superhero content at this point. You know, we kind of talked a little bit before, and you said that people are kind of comparing him to greats as like a Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people have said that the upper echelon of like the superhero roles, you have people like Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, who has the craziest longevity. Mm-hmm. You have Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark Iron Man. Mm-hmm. You have Ryan Reynolds perfect as Wade Wilson Deadpool. I think that this series as a whole probably put him in that conversation. Though people always loved Loki.
Oh yeah.
This was a wrap up to sort of encapsulate who he is as the character.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's definitely also cemented himself, like you said, as this character. Like I can't envision anyone else playing a Loki other than Tom Hiddleston. He just really, like, from the beginning, he's always delivered, to be honest. I really can't think of a bad Loki performance of his. And like I said, this season 2 really cemented him as being a great, I think, as far as all of these characters. Obviously he's now the most powerful character, I could say. So like he's even, I'd even put him above a few of those greats, to be honest, just because he's played such an important role in this MCU, our version of the MCU coming up and everything. And so I don't know, I consider him, I think he has cemented himself as one of the greatest superheroes now, considering he was a supervillain.
Yeah. So part of it too for me is in terms of just the performance, right? Mm-hmm. There's been so much emotion driven in this character, starting from the first film, where he's this neglected kid brother, and he's the one that feels that he has this objective to get to the throne, and he's jealous of his brother Thor. He's the main villain of the first Avengers movie, which is crazy to think about now.
That's a big role to have for the first. He set the stakes up for everything.
Yeah,
if you really think about it.
Yeah, and think about for how many years people were like, Marvel has a villain problem. Marvel has a villain problem. But Loki was not in that conversation. People really loved Hiddleston's performance. Then you jump into things like his comedic chops in Ragnarok, where you start to see him have different interactions with people other than Chris Hemsworth, right? Like some interactions with Goldblum, interactions with Ruffalo. Awesome stuff. And then we get this series that season 1 of Loki, people going into it were like, oh, Loki's getting a show interesting, because he also dies in the beginning of Avengers Endgame. So, or Infinity War, right? Infinity War. So there was so much of the character that people were like, wait, like how is Loki getting a show? His character in the normal MCU is dead. And then obviously we find out in Endgame that it's the 2012 version of Loki that is at the end of the Avengers that gets the stakes and gets the spotlight in his own series. Season 1 overperformed. I feel like everybody thought it was way better than they thought it would be anticipating it. So then you have a huge bar to set with season 2, and I think he blasts through it. Like we've talked so much for the last few weeks about how we were worried because some of the episodes hadn't been Loki centric. The last 3, and really a main highlight on the final 2, centers so much around Hiddleston's performance and hinges on his shoulders. And I think I can confidently say that I personally believe that this episode is the best episode of Marvel television that they've done so far across streaming.
Oh yes, I can put this episode in the category of best content Marvel has put out. To be honest,
I would agree with that.
Like I was watching this whole season was giving me heavy Infinity War vibes the entire time, and this last episode I feel like can arguably be put up there with Infinity War. In my opinion, Infinity War is like the best thing Marvel has ever put out. Mm-hmm. So like that's like I would put this season and this last episode in the top 5 of everything Marvel has ever.
I wouldn't argue that. I think too that the two of them working in congruence with each other, season 1 and season 2 as a whole story, is definitely up there. Yeah. I think the creator of the show, or one of the head writers, maybe for season 2, talked about how this was meant to be a 1/2 and 2/2 story. So I don't think at the end of this, when we finally get to the conclusion of this season, we might end up having the conclusion of this series. We might have the ending of Loki's story with the TVA, at least in terms of streaming content, but wrapping it all up across 12 episodes now, having close to 12 hours to dive in and dig through. I mean, Easter eggs, the theories, the character work, the character development, the overall story arc, and seeing Hiddleston's version of this character evolve, to me is one of the best things Marvel's ever done. Having said that, where we're at with Marvel right now, it leaves you in a weird place.
Yes.
Because so much is not right in terms of the way that things are fitting throughout the timelines and the way that things are working out in terms of the fans' reception to things. They managed to stick the landing and then some with this. We will get into the conversation on what we think it means going forward, but we both were very happy with the finale, I would say.
Very happy with it. Yes, this. I don't know. It got my hopes up a little bit with the season we're in, but it was nice to have just like genuinely like good Marvel content.
Yeah,
because it has been a while.
Awesome.
And it was good. Yeah.
For sure. So let's dive in. We're going to do this a little different than we've done because there's so much to go through. We're going to try to break this down maybe scene by scene the best that we can. Okay. Right? So I don't know if you noticed this. The opening sequence in this episode gives us the Marvel Studios logo that we see before every project. It was in reverse. Did you catch that?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. What?
So it's in terms of the imagery that we're shown, it's in reverse. So it starts with what is usually the last shot that we see within the letters going backwards. Wow. So even like when you see the animated thing, like usually, so you have the comic strip like the comic strip, and then it shows you like those sort of those painted versions of the Avengers. And it usually ends with Cap throwing the shield, and then we get into the screen grabs.
Right. Oh my god.
So when we're going in reverse, we start with scenes from throughout the MCU. Then we get to those paintings. Cap throws the shield first, takes us back towards Bruce and Tony, and then we see the Marvel Studios thing in reverse. So setting the stage. Now it took me 3 watches to figure that out, but it did. It got us to a point where we were off the jump. If you did notice it, you know that so much of this is going to be involved in going back in time and so much time travel, which we messed around a little bit in Endgame, but it's different with the way that Loki's doing it. So that was the first way we started it off. Happy to be able to give you that information, but when you rewatch, I think you'll really enjoy that part of it. It takes us back to where he time slips back to right before Victor Timely gets spaghettied going to try to fix the temporal loom. And we get a really great montage of Loki going back in time to try to figure things out. I forget the name. Is it? I was gonna say Ballroom Blitz, but I don't think it is. The song is Doom Digga Doom 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 Doom. Vinny, do you know what song that is? they've ever had? Immigrant Song? Is that's probably it, right?
I think it is Immigrant
Okay.
Song. Yeah.
So it gets us that kick in with Immigrant Song.
Mhm.
And we get this awesome montage of Loki going back in time because after Victor Timely doesn't get it the first time, he goes up to Obi and he goes, "What did we do wrong? Like, what do we need? It doesn't matter what it is. Just tell me what we need and I will make it happen." And he goes, "We need more time." And then Immigrant Song kicks in. So that's awesome. And we get these moments. There's the first one where he goes back in time. He comes back and he explains everything to Victor Timely the same way that OB explains it in episode 5.
Yeah.
And then OB looks at me and goes, "That's exactly right." And it was just such a great comedic moment from Kiyoe Kwan setting the stage. And then Victor Timely goes down there. He's like, "You got to go quick. And then he just keeps dying and he just keeps dying. And it's an awesome comedic moment. And the thing I loved about it was it's not comedy for the sake of comedy in Marvel, which they do sometimes, which sucks. It's like they bring in writers to be like, "Oh yeah, now make sure you make a joke about Falcon."
Oh, it's so forced sometimes. It really is. It's I feel like the last Thor movie was all that.
Yes. Thor Love and Thunder has like no heart to it.
Not at all. Yeah. And so I feel like 100% they were able to focus in on these moments and even focus in on Victor like a little bit because like he had died so quick, and so like we got to see a little bit more of his character through these attempts as well. And I don't know, I just feel like there was heart, but it was so funny. It was like
but so much of it is baked in the character too. Like
yes.
that is realistic to Ki Hoi Kwan's portrayal of Ouroboros. Like that is something that his character would see through. Similar with Victor Timely, the way he reacts to certain things and quips. It's perfect for the character. Sometimes, like you said, it feels so forced because they're like, "All right, now make sure that you just add a joke there. And make sure that you just add a joke there." And it's like, no, dude, that's not what we fucking need. Like,
yeah.
And I remember somebody on YouTube was actually saying recently too, I was watching a video and they were talking about how old were you when Iron Man came out?
That was like 2008, right?
2008.
I was 8.
Okay, you were 8.
Yeah.
I was 13.
Okay.
So did you see it in theaters when it came out?
It's so funny. I saw it in theaters, but I saw it with my parents, and the first scene was like him having sex, and they were like,
"Oh yeah,
we can't have our kid in here," and they took me out, and then I had to watch it alone afterwards.
Oh my god!
So that's how I like got into Marvel. But
okay. Yeah. No, but that's a great experience. So I saw it when I was 13, and I like. So the person on YouTube who forgive me, I don't remember who I'm crediting, but they're talking about how when we as Marvel fans saw these films, we were children.
Yes.
We have grown up with the characters. It is time to grow up with the characters. Make your characters more mature. Make them and the sweet spot of some of it, they're able to encompass, right? Like I don't approve of the way that Joss Whedon has done things in the industry, but he had a pulse on making great comedic moments with adult characters in comics. Yeah. It's like the way that DC sort of goes, and again, Marvel has their they have their equation on how they do things, but some of it becomes too cliche. With this, I don't feel like it does at all. With Loki,
no, not at all. I feel like everything delivers. They even do subtle things like repeat the same frames of shots. There's one frame that killed me every time I saw it, and it was such a subtle thing. It was, what's his name? He on their team, and he's like he helps over
Casey. Okay,
Casey.
yes.
It was like every time that Victor died, it would cut back to the same shot of Casey just like so stunned. But they did it every single time, and it just kind of like subtle things like that are just like. I don't even know if it was meant to be a comedic as much as they thought it would be, but it just hit, and it hit because of everything we were watching. Yes. No,
yeah.
I feel like
it's like the perfect encapsulation. Exactly. You have character, you have writing, you have editing.
Exactly.
Right. Another part that's great within that montage, after he does it, I think probably 5 or 6 times, he goes a little further back and he barges into the meeting that Victor is having with the Hunter, Ravonna, and Miss Minutes. And he goes, "Miss Minutes, I know you're incredibly hurt and you're really upset, but listen, I need him." And he just pulls him out. And it's like a moment that was so consequential 2 episodes ago that we talked about. And we were like, oh my God, dude, like Miss Minutes is like is talking about her love for this character, and her and Ravonna are trying to corner Victor, just completely negated because Loki's like, no, motherfucker, we need to get this temporal loop figured out.
Yes, but it also plays so much into like this, like him being able to rewrite these moments, like, and like that again, we're gonna touch in this on this phrase a lot, I'm sure, this episode, but that God of stories sort of thing, and it's showing like how easy it was and how like quick they were able to just throw moments like that in there, and even like again following the comedian. I remember Miss Minutes, when it cut to them, you just hear like the blink blink sort of sound effect, and it's quiet, like things like that are just so subtle, and it's just it's moving so quick, but it still hit each thing. And so that was a perfect scene, I thought.
And I don't know if anybody, well, I mean, I'm sure there are other actors that could do it, but he has such a great familiarity with the character that he's able to do it so seamlessly.
Yes.
Like that is Loki.
Yes.
Like that's been Loki in his DNA, regardless of him being a supervillain or a superhero, since 2011's Thor. That is the character. And he's able to bake that in moments. And I don't know, like, I'm so curious because he's so familiar with the character, if some of it was improv, if some of it was like, even if it's little things, but like just the way that he addresses certain people in these scenes. And then we transition to the next part where he goes further back to, I call it like the war room, where they're sort of having that discussion about how they need Victor to go down the runway, or just how they're able to fix the temporal loom. And he walks in and he goes, what does he say? Oh, so he walks in with Victor and Mobius, and before Obi can say anything, he just goes, all right, you know what's crazy? Here's the TVA handbook. This is Victor Timely, you're Obi. You guys wrote it together. Isn't that great? Like, and they're just like, they don't even have a proper introduction because he's like, we got to get this going. We got to get this going. We got to get this going. Mm-hmm. So I thought that he goes, you know what's amazing? You both wrote it. It's like such an awesome comedic moment that's baked in Marvel's DNA when we were on the upward trajectory of Marvel projects. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciated that. Did you have anything in terms of other comedic moments or some that stuck out of the ones we already talked about?
Nothing really specific that stuck out. We kind of touched on all of the amazing moments that happened. But again, it's just like the way that, and this episode, they really, really touched in it. But this whole season, the way that Marvel's been able to play with time in general, like these scenes are like we're able to laugh through this, and again it's moving quick, but like once again, like these are like low-key big things that are happening. Like these are like we're watching Loki rewrite things that we already saw weeks ago. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And like just like that feeling as like a viewer at that point is just like it hits 10 times harder, because it's like, oh snap, like yes, he's funny, he's doing this, but like we watch this like it's deja vu for us at this point, you know. It's like the way that they're able to do that. So it's just all that this whole intro to the episode was just spot on perfect.
Yeah, it's like a masterclass in energy. It's like a masterclass in being able to have your viewer watch the same thing but pick up on different things at the same time and tell the same story in a different way. It was remarkable. Yes. I just thought the episode as a whole is amazing, but some of these moments, like you said, setting us up to it, where after the war room scene, basically, he just goes, how long is it going to take me? He pulls Obi aside and he goes, how long is it going to take someone like me to get all the knowledge that I need in order to get this done the way that we needed to get done? And he goes, decades. And then Victor Timely goes, centuries. And you just know, and at that point, you're like, all right, here we go. Centuries back. But I love that they're smart enough to not have us view that, because then it's like they hit the sweet spot of, like we just talked about, you love the way they mess with time. You love the way that they do it through editing, the way they do it through camera work, the way they do it through dialogue. If you give us some of that centuries montage, then I feel like you start to get into that monotonous period and you start to sort of relegate the viewer to something that's so continuous that you're like, all right, man, I'm like bored. I don't need to see this now. I want to get to the conclusion. Definitely. And they avoid that completely.
Yeah, definitely. They avoided it. Yeah, like you said, it's like at a certain point, it's just like, because you forget throughout all the techniques that and the elements that they're using, that they're still supposed to be getting like one step closer each attempt to the success. And so like you're right, at a certain point, like the viewer's just like all right, come on, give it to us. And so I agree that would have been too much. It would have been a lot. and it was perfect. It felt like a callback to Endgame. I'm making a lot of callbacks, with this and stuff like that. But like the 5 years later, centuries later, random sort of small callback, but it almost hit harder for me because of that. Even though it was like a comedic element sort of thing, it was like, oh damn, like centuries, like And so it's like, but like again, it was smart. I feel like everything that they did this whole sequence was just smart.
Well, I think it's great that you have that ability to feel like the fact that we could feel nostalgic about a movie that only came out 4 years ago, but it is a while ago. Like you think about it in terms of everyday time, like people watch TikToks of ours that are 30 seconds, but 4 years ago is, in the grand scheme of things, a long time to watch more content. But it makes you feel nostalgic about these really great moments in the MCU.
Definitely. And then also, like remembering that all of this show plays like directly after, if you think about it, those events. So it's like, in a way, it's
messing with time.
Time is crazy. They're doing crazy things, but I mean,
it's awesome. I love it.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So he goes back in time. We get the centuries later graphic, and he's the one that gets the knowledge to perfectly sort of counteract the temporal loom and expand the rings himself. And he explains that to them before he even goes back in time. So he comes back. He explains everything to Timely. No time to waste. We finally get a moment where Victor Timely breaches that radiation, and he works his way all the way down the runway. He does everything right. We see another great just acting by Hiddleston, where you just see pure joy on Loki's face. He's like, finally, I just exhausted myself for centuries of time to learn all this knowledge, and we finally reached the apex. We did what we had to do, and he's okay. He's like, come back. And he's smiling the whole time. It's awesome. He comes in, and for a brief moment, you think that they had solved the problem. You start to see that the universes are all sort of condensing, and the rings are getting a little bigger. And everyone celebrates for probably about 20 seconds. And then you get the beep on the computer screen, and Loki's like, what's going on? What's wrong? And Obi's like, it's not working anymore. There's too many universes. And Victor's like, it's infinite. He goes, you're not able to contain it because it's infinite. It's basically like dividing by zero. Awesome line delivery. Awesome sort of way to boomerang the audience back and forth. How did you feel about the execution of us finally getting to that point and then having it all washed away in seconds?
I thought that the execution was perfect, to be honest. That build up to having Victor reach that point, and like again continuing the small comedic elements where it's like he was able to say certain things like don't do this, that kind of like tied into, okay, they've been doing this a lot of times, and we didn't have to see those other attempts, but we knew like don't put the thing down because it'll roll off the runway and things like that. So still playing into those elements, but like being able to see that bit of success, being able to see Victor get there, and like I felt such like a warm feeling when Victor made it in, and you saw like that moment where like Victor and Loki are kind of like almost like had the arm around each other, and they're almost like tapping each other's chest like we did it. And it almost felt like, oh snap, this isn't Kang. Like this isn't like, like Victor is like,
he's that dude.
He's that dude. He is. And like Loki is also that dude, because like, they were just like the support and everything, and it just felt so good. But Marvel is good for those boomerangs, and we needed that. We needed to be brought back to this reality that, okay, like this is still 15 minutes into this hour-long episode. Like clearly, like there has to be something that's not going to work. And the quickness, the way that they were able to snap themselves right out of that moment, it just was perfect. It was like everything was moving so quick, and they're playing with time, and then they're still able to like stop time perfectly and be able to allow us to just sit in like oh snap, okay, like that was fun. We had our fun, but like we got to get serious. Like this is like not working, and so it just pushed it much more farther than they probably even anticipated in that scene, just simply because of the dramaticness in it. And it was done.
And we've talked about Hiddleston's acting, which always deserves the kudos, but Jonathan Majors, man, like they're in a spot. They're definitely in a spot. We can't comment so much because we don't know what's going to happen in this court case, but God, what a misery it will be to lose this guy as a talent, because he's remarkable and he's great in this role and he's great in all these parts. So much so when we go forward a little bit in what we're going to talk about, but even in those moments, like you said, as timely, just realizing and having so many different versions of this character within himself, so much so that he can mock him later on. Like it's great. But within that moment, you discover, without even the dialogue, you as the viewer realize that the only way that Loki can get through this, or so we think, is he has to go back to the season 1 finale, and he needs to kill Sylvie. And then we're back. I was immediately like, oh my God, we're going back to this. Because at the time that we get that episode and that dramatic 3-way conversation between Sylvie, Loki, and He Who Remains, that was like perfection to me at that point. I was like, this is one of the greatest moments in MCU history. And they add to it in such a brilliant way, where we basically see Loki going through this montage again of him trying to stop Sylvie, to stop her from killing He Who Remains. And he fails in many attempts. We don't know, again, how many attempts. It seems like it's probably hundreds of thousands. And there isn't even a moment where he stops her. Like, he stops her and he kind of has the upper hand, but he's like, I can't kill her. And he lets her go, and she kills He Who Remains again. And then he finally asks him, he goes, are you going to fight back? Holy shit. Do you want to tell the audience how incredible this sequence is? I want you to describe this.
Sure, I can, because oh my God. So first of all, let me just talk a little bit about what you just said, because that whole being brought back to that moment and that stake was just an unbelievable feel. This whole episode was like an unbelievable feeling altogether for a viewer. But if you watched Loki season 1 when it first came out, and the last episode came out, and you saw He Who Remains for the first time, and you probably had no idea who he was, but how like serious of a moment this was, and how hard hitting of a moment. I remember watching that moment, like watching it during COVID years ago at this point, and being like, okay, like I have no idea really who he is, but this has to be kind of like big. And now years later being brought back to that moment, but now knowing who he is and how serious this is, that level just for a viewer is just insane. It's crazy. And so I was crazy hyped when we were brought back to that moment. But yes, we saw this moment, there's a lot of hesitation in Loki having to kill her. And then like finally he said something to Kane. He asked her, you're gonna do something, and he stopped time. And it's incredible. Was in that moment where it kind of got serious, because now you realize that this was really a moment between Loki and He Who Remains. And so he was like, she's in the view, like, let's get rid of her. And he was able to just easily shoo her away.
Bloop her away.
Exactly. And at that point, then it really was just this moment with He Who Remains and Loki. And essentially he revealed that he knew everything at that point. He not only knew everything, he revealed that he set everything up. He was the one that gave Loki the ability to be able to time slip. Like he said, all of this was just a part of that plan that he said in season 1 when we watched everything that he said. And so again, it's like real life, like being brought back to that same moment years ago. And again, you could probably explain a little bit more of like the specifics and what he said.
It's just, yeah. So he talks about the time slipping. I have in my note here, the whole entire scene with He Who Remains and Loki is fucking amazing. One of the best in MCU history. And I really genuinely believe it is, because there's so much within the acting and there's so much within the writing of this where you just see how manipulative and how crazy this version of Kang is, where he's like, you thought that this is like, of course I'm going to do it, man. Like he has a line too where I love it. He says, I made the tough choices. That's why I get the big chair. And it's like, I've been doing this for years, bro. Like, what are you going to do now? Because I understand that you probably feel exhausted. I don't know how many times you've been doing this, but you have a fucking choice to make, because the difference is I have been here the whole time. And before they even have that conversation, he goes, go do this a couple thousand more times, and then you let me know when you want to have a conversation. And it's just like, he is like goes back so much to what you have echoed throughout the last couple of weeks. The handling of time and the grasp of how important time is. Compare it to your own lives, viewers. Think about how many things on a daily basis you have to deal with and you are stressed out about that have to do with the aspect of time. And this guy can manipulate and control it for every single character we've ever seen come through the streamline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's remarkable to think about, that we are friggin' over 30 movies and television series in, despite what you may think of them. We're years and years of work that's been put in. And it's in the hands of this villain, Kang the Conqueror. Through this version, we see this variant, He Who Remains. The temporal loom is a failsafe. It doesn't, he goes, the TVA is collateral damage. It's easy to rebuild. This is something that we just saw Loki go through for 2 seasons to write, to get the TVA as an established thing. We've talked a lot as well about the role TVA might have in Deadpool going forward. I'm not so sure we even see the TVA ever again, based on the way that this conversation goes, based on the conclusion of the series. It's incredible to me, the way that they were able to hold that to a standard that is like above so many of the projects that we've seen in recent years. And he goes, all the variants are out there. They're already out there. And we know they're in the Coliseum because we see them in the post-credit scene of Quantumania. Mm. And then we have Kang that was already out there as the villain of that film. But he basically sets Loki up to be like, dude, you got to figure this out. Because it really is either you let her continue to kill me and you're going to keep doing this and we're going to keep doing this and I've been doing this forever, or you kill her. And then we'll see what happens. Because I've been in this chair for years. And if you kill her, then we'll fuck around and find out. He's like, I'll remain in this chair and we will do the best that we can do to prevent other things from happening. Loki doesn't want to accept that, which I think is insane and incredible. But give me your commentary. So much to talk about within everything I just said, but so much of that is built in that character and built in incredible writing. The show is so good. The finale is so good. Freaking out about it.
Yes, this whole moment was just insane. Also, like knowing that we had just watched a whole intro with Victor Timely, and knowing that this is the same guy and like, same actor, like just like completely different acting though performances, and that alone just blew me away. He's such a talent. Please, I hope everything's okay. But that scene was just the fact that not only that he like lay everything out, he almost laid everything out to the point where it was like there was really only those 2 options, and he was still gonna win no matter what. Like it just showed how evil he is, and he's like the calm one again. And so it just shows like not only that, but how much thought these Kangs are really putting into this stuff. Granted, this is He Who Remains, so this is this variant, and this, you know, we've had a lot of focus on him now, but it just shows just Kang in general, like what we're really dealing with. As far as the states of it all, I think that I was super surprised when Loki said that basically he didn't agree with either option, and that he wanted to write his own thing. I knew in that moment, like, oh snap, that was the moment that Loki was setting himself up to really like become like this, like
the god of stories.
Not even just the god of stories, just like the god of MCU at this point. like this legendary character. When I heard that initial like, no, I don't want to do that, like there was so much power in that statement, only because we also knew what that meant as just for the multiverse.
Well, he tries to drive it home too. He Who Remains. He goes, I'm just going to destroy the temporal loom. And he goes, all right, bro, if you do that, we all die. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a brutal war. Mm-hmm. And then there's no fixing anything. We all die. Mm-hmm. That is literally in place to try to make this all work. He goes, so if you decide to do that, then that's on you. But that's going to just lead to all of us dying rather than just killing one person.
Mm-hmm. And it was one of those crazy, absolutely crazy. But it's one of those moments where it was like we all knew we were going to get to this moment at some point, just because Marvel has announced everything. We know Kang's going to be the Kang Dynasty at this point, so we knew we were going to get to this moment. But it was like the fact that it was buried in choices that involved him having to now look out for his friends, him having to think outside the box and not fully think of himself. And that's what really drove that like him saying no, and then really made it hit harder, because we knew now that it just the stakes were much higher. I can't say a lot because that's leading us into basically what happens next.
Yes. Well,
everything, but
going back to what you said about the friends too,
mm-hmm.
I think it's essential to remember that is a core of who Loki is as a character. Yeah. Not only throughout this series, but think about the scene in the beginning of Infinity War when he comes up to try to help his brother. Mm-hmm. And think about these moments where he self-sacrifices in things like Ragnarok, in things like Infinity War. Because we get to that version of the character, which this is not, but deep within Loki and the eventual versions of Loki that we get throughout the MCU, that's essential to who he is. And it's so deep rooted in the preparation for these characters and setting the stage and the care for these characters. And that's why so much too, where people start to talk about bringing back RDJ and bringing back Chris Evans and bringing back all these people. It's hard because they're so important and integral to all of this, but you had a perfect wrap up with Endgame. And I'm glad that Hiddleston's still like in it, because he's played this character for so long and so much is on his character rewriting things to be an anchor with all these other new characters that we haven't latched onto the same way. There are certain characters, right? Like, I personally love Iman Vellani's portrayal of Miss Marvel. I haven't seen the Marvels yet, but I love her in the series. I think she's perfect for the character. Then there's other people like Charlie Cox's Daredevil. That's a character, a version of that character that he does such a great job. You don't want to see other people play that role. But there are characters within the MCU now that you don't have that same attachment to. Tom Holland is up there, but he's also owned by Sony, and you never know what's going to happen with that, because they could just decide one day, fuck you, Marvel, you can't have him anymore. We're taking him back. So good luck, because you don't have the rights to the character. So much hinges on this character and what is the core of who Loki is going forward. And then we get the moment. So you alluded to it. So one more question I did have, though. Based on that conversation, when He Who Remains does say to him, or you destroy the loom, or you kill Sylvie, and we protect what we can. And he's alluding to the sacred timeline. In that moment, do you believe He Who Remains? Do you believe that is what he's setting up? And if he does decide to just kill Sylvie, they could be okay. They have the sacred timeline. You can continue to live on the sacred timeline, and we won't have all this stuff happen. Or do you think he's fucking around with him?
I think he's being serious, honestly. I think, obviously, we know you can't trust him, so there's just always going to be that untrusting nature with him. But I feel like he really did lay it out. Like, he never really, like, lied, if you think about it. He was honest, but he was just manipulative. And so I kind of said that funny, manipulative. So but no, it was just, so he never fully lied. So I do think that it would have been the truth. I do think that obviously it wouldn't have been like a situation where, I take that back. I think that it would have been a situation where it would have been okay, but I could have seen maybe he would have erased Loki's memory. Something like that. That was where like the lie would have, or like the fakeness would have came into it. I think that everything would have still been sort of the way it was. Just because I do believe the honesty in that, but like, again, you can't fully trust him. So it's like, it could have been a Ravonna situation all over again. Yeah,
for sure. All right. So then we go back to the moment you alluded to. Loki decides on a decision, but he time slips himself back to the first conversation he has with Mobius. And so much of what we talked about a few weeks ago was they don't have a lot of time to wrap up all these strings. Boy, did they fucking wrap up all these strings. It's so great. Now, we, I think last week's episode, we said we wish was a little longer. Wish there was a little bit more substance to it. The finale, this is, again, Marvel has a big streaming finale problem. They just do. They've never really always been able to satisfy the viewer. Even in a series like WandaVision, which is one of their best, the finale totally underwhelms. Loki season 1 does not underwhelm. It's one of the best finales. This tops it. We get an additional 12 minutes, a 59-minute episode. So basically a full hour with these characters. And so we get this moment where Loki time loops back to his first conversation with Mobius. Another moment of incredible writing. Another moment where we get to see Owen Wilson play into the dramatic performance that he's capable of giving. And he basically says, Loki walks him through everything he's going to tell him, because you're going to show me all my memories on the screen and how it's my glorious purpose to own the throne. Call him back to the episode. And he says, I just have a question. Or he basically baits him into being like, how do you know all this? And like, he goes, I have a question for you and I need you to answer it for me. And he asks him, what is the exact line of dialogue? He says something about like, how do you know when it's time to do the right thing or something like that?
How do you know when it's time? Yeah. Or something about people, or it might be that.
Yeah. Something along the lines of that. But then we get this dark moment that's a callback to something that happens in season 1, where Mobius talks about a hunter in the TVA that his job was to prune an 8-year-old that had killed 5,000 people in his lifetime. And he hesitates for just a second, and it leads to the death of all these people before the other hunter that he was on the mission with goes in and slays this 8-year-old. The hunter he's talking about is Mobius. He's talking about himself, and his partner is Ravonna Renslayer. So that's an awesome reveal right there. And then you just see this beautiful moment where he keeps talking to him, and they talk about the role that that played in the shaping of his life and the decisions that he's had to make and things like that. And Loki knows what he has to do, and he gets up and he shakes his hand. Did you feel that was a moment where we don't see those characters interact again? Because I did. I felt that was the closure, which is tragic because their chemistry together is so great. But do you think that was the end of the Lobius broness that comes of those two characters?
Yes, I do. I do think that was the end. I think that it needs to be the end with the things we're about to cover that follow. And obviously that moment I feel like was a conclusion in itself for them. Maybe not for Mobius, because he didn't know what that Loki was, had time to look back. But for Loki, it was the moment of reassurance I think he needed. And like the words, the advice that Mobius gave him, it helped him. And that moment when you kind of see him like start to spaghetti off, it was, I just felt like it would be too much if there would be no reason, honestly, for them to have another interaction unless it was something like where the stakes were higher, like an Avengers level thing where they have to be brought back together. But no, that I feel like that would then be a forced thing.
Because he doesn't have abilities. Mobius is not a hero character. He's just, I guess you can consider him a sidekick. I feel like that's kind of kicking him down, but like he's a guy. Mobius is just the guy, but he's the best friend of Loki, and he gets his closure at the end of the episode where, following the conclusion of the big thing we get with Loki, he asks to go back in time, and he watches himself playing with his kids. So that's a beautiful moment that he has. But after that conversation with Mobius and he spaghettis away, like you said, he goes back to talk to Sylvie in the moment from the last episode when everybody else is spaghettiing away. And then he freezes time.
That was sick. He also did that, and we didn't bring it up before, but he did that when he was talking to He Who Remains.
Yes.
At one point. That moment showed me like, oh, this guy mastered time.
Yeah. He knows his shit,
right?
Yeah. So he freezes time, goes back to talk to Sylvie, and Sylvie's basically like, if you're waiting for I know why you're here. If you're waiting for my approval, like to kill me, you're not going to get it. But like, I understand, like if you've been doing this a lot longer than I have, obviously. Going back in time, you know what the solution is. So, whatever. And there's such a moment of desperation by Loki there where he's like, I need to find a way to save my friends and save time. And so he goes back to the moment. Where they have to bring the the device to the temporal loom, and he doesn't even put the suit on. He just goes out there like a fucking boss. He goes all the way down the runway. But as he's going down the runway, we start to see him evolve into not the exact same costume that we've seen in the past, but a new version of Loki. He still has the long green cape. He's got a cloak. He's in all green. He gets his crown. And he manipulates the loom in his own way and destroys it. Holy shit.
Holy shit balls. Holy shit fuck. Every curse word I could think of. Yes. Amazing.
How does that moment play out for you? Because, I mean, for everyone, I'm sure, remarkable moment, incredible character development. You see Loki develop all of this throughout the episode, throughout the 2 seasons. How did it hit for you?
It hit so hard. It really did. Especially now after seeing all these attempts too. Like we've seen so much of Loki at this point. And this whole episode just like solidified a lot in his character. At least everything that we'd seen so much to that moment, including everything that we've seen for like the past years now. That was like a moment where you like really realized like he found his purpose. Like you could see like not only did he find it, but like it was just so dope to see like him just become all powerful, like not being fake. Like it was just you could see that like he was where he needed to be and what he had finally found like that
Purpose.
That purpose. Yeah, I was trying to think of another
different word
because I keep saying purpose. But again, it was like the most rewarding moment. He at this point was like he was like giving his whole life at this point to save the TVA, and like through these conversations that you got to see with Mobius and with Sylvie and with He Who Remains, you could see like the clarity that he got, and that like it wasn't just something that like he thought he like had to do. It was something he truly wanted to do at that point, you know, which plays a lot into that into being a hero at that point, which is what he had been chasing for the longest time.
And he didn't even know he was chasing it as a hero either. Like it's such a great callback to that line he has in the first Avengers movie where he goes, "I'm burdened with glorious purpose." He gets his glorious purpose here, and it is a burden. It's a massive burden because as he's going down the runway, everything explodes. He starts to grab the branches of all the different timelines, and they start to turn green. It's beautiful, visually incredible.
Crazy.
And he is just walking, and he takes a step off the bridge, and it starts to form underneath him. And there's a throne there, and he gets there, and he brings everything together, and that makes him, it gives him his purpose. Mm-hmm. He's burdened with a massive purpose now. He's the guy in the chair, and he's in control of time, and he is in control of these stories that you talked about in last week's episode. Rewriting the MCU realistically is how we can deduct that sort of situation. And it gives free will to all the people at the TVA. We see that at the end where Wunmi Masaku's character is talking to everybody, and she's now running the TVA. Like I said, Mobius goes back to see his family. Casey's working within them, and I think Sylvie's there as well. And he goes back to that citadel at the end of time, and it's just the throne. He takes a seat, and he builds this beautiful tree, which I think you had talked about a little bit in our pre-recording, that they build it up to this thing that in Norse mythology is like this big symbolic thing. Did you read into that? Or
yeah, I read into it. I didn't know anything about that beforehand. But I think it's Eddrasil. It's like it connects the 9 realms in North mythology. And so in a way you could see it was like when you saw the tree, it was like Eddrasil.
It looks like the Tree of Life in Animal Kingdom for Disney. It's incredible. Exactly. Great visual.
That's a great actually analogy. I didn't even think about that. What's it called? But it was like that, like but instead of connecting those 9 realms, it was now connecting the multiverse. So like, it was like that's where you could see that connection, and a lot of people were calling that out. So
he's literally holding together the existence of the universe of the MCU now. It's crazy to think about that, and I guess that sets us up into this next part of this conversation where everybody else gets their wrap up at the end of the show. It's not really necessarily about what happens to everybody else in the TVA. Maybe we see Sylvie again. Maybe we see Mobius again.
Mm-hmm.
But so much of this is Loki's moment and a perfect wrap up of not only the series, but his character as a whole character arc. Where do you think we go from here? Because it's obvious I think what we had discussed maybe 2 episodes ago was him maybe leading the multiversal Avengers. He literally has a bigger job than that. Like, he's holding everything together. So we don't get no post-credit scene, which I don't know how you felt about that. At first, I hated it because, of course, as Marvel fans, it's like more, popcorn, more. But I thought it was beautiful to end it on that last shot of him on the throne, that close-up. And I think we're going to see so much more of this character, especially towards the end of this saga. Like, he might wind up being the sacrificial lamb, for the lack of a better term, at the end of this. Like, that might be the only way, by the way, if they don't, or even if they do bring back Robert Downey Jr., they bring back Chris Evans, they bring back Scarlett Johansson, everybody, they bring all them back, seeing them die on screen. It's not going to hit the same, obviously, as the first time we see some of their characters perish and go off in their other things. Seeing Loki die at the end of the saga would hit, to me, based on the end of this series, would hit as hard as Robert Downey Jr. So many thoughts, I'm sure. Just start rolling them off your tongue.
Yeah, so way too many thoughts. Where do I even begin? I do think first, just because you said the most recent thing to go off of, I do think that by the end of this saga, if we saw that moment where we saw something of Loki's death, honestly, I think it would hit harder than a few of these characters, just because now of the position that he's in. Like you said, he's holding everything together, and so now we know that if he lets go, like everyone could die, and so like, and that alone could be the end of the MCU. So like, it's just like, if we see that, like, that could signify the end of the MCU, or at least a hard reset, if anything, and that could all then fall into Loki's character, which just is like, the stakes have been so high this whole season, but it's, again, just continually letting the stakes be high. But as far as just the ending of this episode, I feel like I'm so happy with it. I'm so happy with the things they decided not to do, with like not including those post credit scenes, stuff like that. I genuinely feel like so many things that I want to say.
Dude, just go off.
So like, I just genuinely feel like Marvel is really, I'm going to say this, Marvel is really good at endings. They are very good at endings, and I almost don't want to see him come back, to be honest. Like,
even at the end of this.
Even in the end of this. Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Like, I feel like if they were to do that, and this is the last time we ever see Loki, which I don't think is a smart move marketing wise, because he's this successful for them. But if it is, like, this is like the end of Loki, then I feel like I'm completely content with that. I feel like he just to see him on the throne, like, I feel like and I was going to say this before, but I feel like we forget too that, like, he's still a god, like, you know, like that I remember we were saying that early in an earlier episode, because he's so human at times, you forget that he's a god.
Yeah.
That, like, when I saw him, like, grabbing everything, and everything that he did in this final sequence reminded me, like, oh snap, no, he's a god, like, he can do this, like, and I think that's why I'm so content with this, like, not just that he's a god, just because of it being Loki. Like, I'm super content with the end of this. I would be okay, like I said, if we didn't see him again. I do think we should, just because
I have a theory.
Oh, I love theories.
All right. So I have a legit theory on the way that I think he plays a role in even the complete culmination of the multiverse saga. Okay. Now, we're years away from this, because also Marvel projects are getting pushed every day now. Mm-hmm. The actor strike is over. Yay. We haven't talked about that on any of our pods yet. This is our first one dropping since it happened. So that's great news. Yes. But a lot of Marvel stuff's getting pushed. I think the only movie coming out now next year is Deadpool 3. And I think we're getting Echo in January, and maybe a couple of other series, but no other movies till 2025. Like, Cap got pushed. Another project, I think Thunderbolts got pushed to 2025. So, like, the only one we're getting is Deadpool, which also will play a big role in the MCU going forward, and sort of piggybacking off of this, because we know that there's going to be multiversal aspects to Deadpool 3, obviously, bringing all those characters in the fabric of the MCU. I think we get to a point, we're going to have an emotional moment, maybe in Kang Dynasty, maybe in Secret Wars, maybe in a movie before then or a project before then, where Loki and Thor come back together. Thor is obviously is in shock because his brother is dead, based on the way that he had seen things play out. And I think a big part of the way they have to defeat Kang overall is that Loki is going to have to sacrifice himself by bringing all of these branch timelines together to make one final sacred timeline that will snap everything, essentially, for the lack of a better term, because that also happens in Endgame. Not a literal snap, but that will rewrite the MCU. So that will get us to our one basic sacred timeline that we need to get back to, that He Who Remains has alluded to, and that will lead to the sacrifice. He will be the big sacrifice in Secret Wars, getting us back to where we go. And then that's when we start to see, I don't know how they wrap that up in terms of like what characters carry over, which characters don't. Maybe we start to, because everyone I think is on the 616 plane for the most part. Like I think that's what we've discovered, is everyone is Earth 616. And I don't know if that's where we reset or if we reset in a different Earth. Maybe we reset where some of the characters are variants. But like, let's say at the end of Secret Wars, we're on Earth 842. And in that Earth, we have a different version of Ms. Marvel, but it's still played by Iman Vellani. And we have a different version of Black Panther, but it's still, what's her name? What can I think? I'm losing it. Brain fart, everyone. Whoever is Black Panther now will be Black Panther in a different universe. I'm just losing it right now. Letitia Wright is her name. Is the actress's name. I can't think of the character right now. This is after talking about Loki for over an hour.
Right.
But that is my theory in terms of he has to be the integral part. He is literally holding everything together. And despite, like, I do respect and appreciate, this would be a perfect ending for him. I think there are other ways you could do perfect endings. There has to be a way we get back to this, because even though he is holding everything together, the timelines are still branched. We just don't have as many of them. So we know that there's these different branch timelines. One of them, I think, is going to be the X-Men universe, because we start to see some of these characters come back in. But that is the way I think he is going to be the core of what gets us to the end of that. And then maybe we see Thor retire, because I don't know if we're going to be able to keep bringing him back. I mean, Chris Evans is getting older. Yeah. But I think Loki might wind up being the big sacrifice, because the only other character that would hold the same weight, unless we see a lot of development over the next few films, to me is Spider-Man. And even that, he encapsulates all of what Marvel is. And I think Tom Holland is going to be in the role regardless of whether he's in the MCU or he's in Sony. So that's my theory. I think that he ultimately is the one that's going to have to make the big sacrifice, and he's going to be the big death at the end of Secret Wars, and he's going to be the one with the most knowledge on Kang. He's going to know what the variants look like. He's going to, him and Scott Lang. So
yeah, I like that theory. I agree with that theory, actually. There's a lot of things in that theory that I think are deserving. I think that we need that moment between Thor and Loki. If we don't get it, I guess I'd kind of be okay with that, just because he still has his own story at this point. But it would be nice to get that, especially knowing that we're getting a Thor 5. It would be nice to see if that reunion happen in Secret Wars, and for him to be that character, that sacrifice. Just because there probably will need to be a sacrifice, and at this point, like, you're right, he's the most obvious choice of that sacrifice. Yeah. I also think that I don't know. I had a question. I don't want to lose this question first before, just because.
Yeah.
Do you think that, obviously, like, with your theory, you think that he'll come back into this in Secret Wars or it's
Loki?
Loki. You think that, like, that will eventually, like, you think that?
I think that the next time we see Loki is going to be in the post-credit scene of Kang Dynasty.
So then, do you think that?
Because I think they're going to lose in Kang Dynasty, similar to how we had the Infinity War and Endgame parallels.
So then, do you think that he'll have the ability then, because he's connected to all these timelines, to like almost like cast himself into these times? Like, do you think that he'll have like? Do you think Marvel will go that far with this, with him being in control of everything? Like how do you think we're going to see Loki again?
I don't know, because part of it, the way that I took the finale is you got to like, even going back to that line of dialogue that Major says where he's like, I made the tough decisions, I'm in the big chair.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't leave that. Like there are variants of him that are in different situations, but he who remains in that chair throughout all the time. And I think he talks about it in the season 1 finale. He's like, can't leave, that like this is his job, maintaining everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you noticed this, but like when he sits in the chair at the Citadel at the end of time, like he's in that same environment that Kang or that He Who Remains was in. It's just destroyed. It's like rubble, and he has to rebuild that, obviously. So I don't know if we see Loki jumping around in universes. I think that he has to remain where he is. And I think that Thor finds a way to get to him. And I think that's going to be a big payoff. I think it's going to be closure for those two characters together. I think it's going to be closure to the MCU that we've been seeing by the time Secret Wars comes out. I don't know off the top of my head what year it comes out. Let's say 2028. That'll be 20 years of Marvel, which is crazy to think about. But that'll be 20 years of Marvel. That might be the perfect way to sort of wrap this up. So based on right now, I would have to say my theory would hold that I think that he remains in the chair until he's dead. I think that we're not going to see him jump.
Even remember when the other version of the Loki variant was able to like trick Kang with like he could cast himself to appear. It was like there's the word of
Richard E. Grant's character of Loki.
Like, there's like a
I'd have to rewatch because I haven't watched season 1 since it first came out.
Like essentially, I'm trying to say like because like with his magic, do you think obviously not leaving the chair? I think Loki Prime, this Loki will always remain in the chair, but you don't think that we'll be able to see like obviously not Loki Prime, but like because he's magic and because he's still holding the whole multiverse together and connected, you don't think we're going to see like at least like
him jumping around a little bit?
Yeah, like
we probably can. I mean, you have to set the stage for multiversal travel, even though they've been trying to do that for the last few years and they're failing. But I can see that. Just based on the emotional aspect of it right now, because that's where I feel like so much of my theory is being driven. I feel like he has to die. I don't.
Oh yeah, I think he'll have to die at some point. But like the build, just because I feel like he's gonna play, like you said, an important part of getting to that conclusion of defeating Kang and getting to that area. But I feel like, and maybe a part of me is still also thinking that maybe he'll be the one to gather the multiversal Avengers and everything.
Yeah, I could see that.
You know, and so like that's why part of my head.
Maybe he has a post-credit scene with Scott. Because again, Scott is the only one that we talked about this last week. He's the only one that to me adds up in terms of a guy that has dealt with Kang. He's dealt in the multiverse. He's dealt in all these different things in quantum physics. There's no other character to me, and we haven't seen the Marvels yet. I don't know if there's that many mentions of it. But to me, he's the only character that would make sense. Like, even in terms of, well, maybe Shang-Chi, because we don't know, because his post-credit scene, he's talking to Bruce and he's talking to Carol, and he's going to start joining them. So maybe he's more in on what's happening than we as the viewers are. I don't know. I think that that's what leaves this finale also really good. It's like the perfect thing that they need right now going forward to keep the anticipation high. I don't know if that same follows through with the Marvels where we end up at the end of that. But yeah, I mean, like I could see it both ways. I could see it where he's jumping around trying to gather people together to try to take him down. Do you think he'll die at the end of Secret Wars?
I do. I think that needs to happen. Like I agree with that. Like I 100% think that's going to happen at some point. Just because you're right, we have to get to the sacred timeline again at some point. And we're gonna have to go back to him at some point because of that. I just feel like I don't know. Like all of this is completely up to how Marvel wants to take it, to be honest. But it would be cool to be able to see like clone versions of him, sort of like him projecting. That's the word I was thinking. Like him being able to project a version of himself into these timelines, basically. I don't know. I don't really know.
He has the ability. Like that's the thing. He's the most powerful. He's ought to be arguably one of the most powerful characters in Marvel now.
I think he is.
Like he solidified it during this season and in the finale. But I don't know, man. There's so many ways we could keep going with this. There's so many theories that we can pour out. I think that maybe in a couple weeks we let some things dissect. We come back after the Marvels and maybe we do a little Marvel roundtable and we discuss things going forward. I think that would be fun.
That would be very fun,
trying to theorize some things.
Oh, that would be a lot of theories and a lot of craziness.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. I think that's it, right?
Is it? Yes.
Too much. Was there anything else? Did we miss anything? I was trying to think. There's one moment with Ravonna, which I know that you had asked me previously.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was necessarily anything like huge, just because I don't think we're gonna get a season 3 or at this point. But there was that moment where we saw where she got pruned. She ended up at the end of time, and she's like in this field alone. And you just kind of see her look up at the sky, and you see like the purple fade.
Yeah,
it could be the.
I think it's Ramatut because she's also next to the pyramid. She's next to a giant pyramid. So I think it's the Kang variant Ramatut. That would make the most sense to me. I think he's also purple. I think like in the comics and on the version we've seen on screen.
He was purple.
Yeah.
I didn't even notice the pyramid. Oh my God.
Wait, she like wakes up and she like sits up and she looks over and there's a pyramid and then she looks back over and there's like a purple like glowing light. And that's all you see. You don't see any version of Kang or anything. But again, in the comics, which we've talked about previously and everyone has alluded to, like they have a romance. And she's too good of an actress, Gugu Mbatha Raw, to just kind of cast her aside at the end of this.
Yeah, I definitely don't think. I feel like the TVA, like we might not see them a lot moving forward, but I think that they'll always
be around.
Yeah, like even if they're just mentioned.
I agree. I think they will have some sort of role in Deadpool. I think we're done with Mobius. I really do. I think we're done seeing Owen Wilson in the MCU, which is sad.
You don't think we'll see him in Deadpool 3?
No, I think he's done. I think he's done because he's done with the TVA. I think we'll see B-15. I hope we see OB. I would love to continue to see Ke Huy Quan in Marvel for so many reasons. Sylvie is another one I'm very curious what she does. Maybe she's a multiversal Avenger, which would be cool.
That would be cool
to see going forward because she has that relationship with Loki too, and them reuniting in the same way with Thor could be interesting to see.
That would be.
I loved her portrayal, Sophia DiMartino. She was fantastic over the last 2 seasons. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to dissect, and it's crazy because yes, there is excitement, but behind so much of the excitement, there's also so many balls that have been dropped in Marvel's court with the future of the MCU. So I think there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to dissect. A lot more projects coming.
A lot more, but we could say the multiverse is officially open.
Yes.
And the Kangs are officially out.
Yes, they are.
So we'll see where that goes.
We'll see where that goes. Well, guys, I think that's going to do it for the end of our very long but deserved conversation for Glorious Purpose, which not only was the name of the finale episode of season 2, but was also the title name of the first episode ever of the series, which I thought was awesome. If you guys don't already, please make sure you guys subscribe to the page. Please comment your thoughts on what you guys thought about the finale, what you guys thought about Loki in general, both seasons, season 2 as a whole. We'd love to hear your comments. We'd love to interact with you guys in the comments. So please make sure you guys comment as well. If you guys don't already, follow us at Cinema Wave Media on Instagram, as well as on TikTok and on Facebook. We also have @_Culture Wave Media, which we're also on Instagram as well. Just signing off, I am Darian Scalamoni.
I'm Michael Peniston.
And we'll see you guys next time.